From Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu.
The shutdown hits day 15. Welcome to the Wednesday edition as the Senate winds up for another vote that is expected to fail today. It'll take place in the next couple of hours as leaders brace for a lot more of this on both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. Coming up, we'll get the very latest from Mike Dorning and our Capitol Influence team, and we'll spend some time in discussion with Democratic Congressman Sam Liccardo of California, with the House at the moment still out of session. The Pentagon press corps is packing up and moving out today after refusing to accept coverage limits. We'll talk about the issue at hand with our political panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeanne, Zaino, and Rick Davis are with us. And we start all this after a look at Wall Street. Charlie Pellet has the latest on the markets from world headquarters in New York. Charlie, where do we start?
Right now we are higher across the board. Lows of the day on the S&P 500 index. But as is often the case, a lot of moving parts to this market. Stocks today getting a lift from bank earnings and trade hopes. Right now we have got the S&P up 13, 66.57 where we stand. That is a gain of just about 0.2%. The Dow giving up earlier gains, just about unchanged on the day, higher by 7 right now at 46,275. NASDAQ, meanwhile, up 85. It is up by about 0.3%. The 10-year yield, 4.03%. The 2-year, 3.50%. The Dow just turning negative, down now by 7. We've got spot gold up $54 the ounce, 41.97, up by 1.3%. Silver is at 52.44 the ounce, up 2%. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.2%. 58.56 a barrel on WTI. I mentioned those bank earnings. Morgan Stanley up 5.3%. Morgan Stanley's stock traders soared past expectations in the third quarter. Bank of America, after earnings, up 4%. Its third quarter results beat estimates as investment banking activity increased amid a long-awaited comeback in M&A. So again, the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ trading mix now, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average lower by 22 points. Argentine bonds are jumping on news that the U.S. is lining up $40 billion in aid, and David Ellison said to be preparing to submit an official merger bid for Warner Brothers Discovery. That's according to the New York Post, citing sources. Warner Brothers Discovery up now by 2.5%. Paramount Skydance unchanged on the day. Again, recapping here, S&P 500 index up 0.1%. Little change. The Dow just turning negative, down 0.1%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. Back we go to Washington. Balance of Power continues. Once again, your host, here he is, Joe Mathieu.
All right, Charlie, many thanks. We'll have more on the markets from Charlie Pellet about 20 minutes time as we connect the dots every day here between Washington and Wall Street. Thank you for being with us on the Wednesday edition. You remember the old saying, the beatings will continue until morale improves. And that seems to be the message from the White House when it comes to the government shutdown, now entering day 15. Well, we're halfway through it. There's going to be a vote in a little while. It'll be the Republican passed in the House CR that continues to fail in the Senate. And unless there's some sort of Christmas miracle here ahead of Halloween, it will fail again. And that will likely be the case for the days ahead. As we told you yesterday, leaders on both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue, whether it's President Trump, his budget director Russ Vought, or Speaker Mike Johnson, suggesting that they are bracing for a protracted shutdown, one that could set records. Maybe we're talking about this in November, maybe over our turkey roll at Thanksgiving. We'll find out. And we're going to talk in a moment with Congressman Sam Liccardo, the Democrat from California, with his thoughts on this. Because as I mentioned, the president is promising more pain the longer this goes on, and he's looking at Democrats. Here's what he said yesterday from the White House. We'll see if we can get that shot for you in just a moment here, because I want you to hear what the president said about canceling, as he referred to, Democrat programs and Democrat agencies. Mike Dorning is with us from our Capitol Influence team here in Washington. You know what I'm talking about, Mike. First, it was the layoffs, and I guess we got about 4,000 last week, but the administration is promising much more.
Yeah, no, they say that they're going to use this as an opportunity to go after what they call Democrat programs the president doesn't like. Mm-hmm. And to lay off a lot more federal workers, and they feel like that way they're punishing Democrats for this and Democratic constituencies.
So, with that said, it's not helping to dislodge any Democratic votes, right? When this comes to a vote today, we expect the same result.
We do expect the same result. The Democrats are dug in on the Affordable Care Act. They want the subsidies to continue. They feel like they have an important issue to stand on, that 20 million people will see, their insurance premiums double, that they can message this, that it's something the party cares about and something that's an effective campaign message. So they feel like this is an important thing to take a stand on. And right now, both sides feel like this is a political opportunity for them, or presented as such.
That's the toughest scenario you can be in, when both sides think they have the moral high ground here. But an interesting turn in the rhetoric yesterday, as Speaker Mike Johnson suggested to the Associated Press that this could be the longest ever shutdown. And the White House very carefully picked off some important pain points from the calendar. This was supposed to be the day military troops went without pay.
Yep.
They found a way around that. Federal law enforcement found a way around that. Funding the WIC program, managed to find some money for that. So these potential deadlines, for lack of a better term, have been removed. Could this, in fact, go on right into next month?
It certainly could. And the longest ever shutdown was under Trump. And the first administration went 5 weeks. And part of, Trump sort of views himself as someone who often tries to get the best of the other side in a deal. And part of that is through projecting strength, projecting that they're not going to give in, and showing that they're not going to give in. And the way you show you're not going to give in is to remove these pain points, because in the polling at the moment, the Democrats are doing slightly better than the Republicans on this shutdown. So you can't use the polls to force the Democrats to fold, at least not right now. And so the president is kind of fortifying himself and his party to at least show the Democrats that they can continue with this a long time. So he's trying to pressure them to cave or give in some way, rather than himself giving ground.
A lot of the conversation until now has been about, well, how did Democrats in the Senate resist the jailbreak? Can Republicans pick off 4 or 5 and get this done, and then a deal is not needed? But I feel like at some point we need to start asking the questions about how long Republicans are willing to wait to address the issue of Obamacare subsidies, knowing that this is going to be a massive issue in many red districts. Just ask Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yeah, no,
and in fact, Texas, Florida, and Georgia, including where Marjorie Taylor Greene is from, are probably the 3 states that are going to get hit the hardest by these premium increases that start coming out November 1st. And it does disproportionately affect Republican areas, particularly Republican House districts. Yep. So they could start feeling pain. They're more likely to start feeling the pain when that open enrollment begins November 1st. That's right. I think the Republicans were hoping the Democrats would feel pain from the government being shut down, and the Republicans saying, hey, this is a Democratic-caused government shutdown. Yeah. But that hasn't been the case. And in a weird way, Trump's steps to kind of fortify himself have also reduced the pain for the Democrats, because, hey, the military are paid. Yeah, right. The WIC benefits are going to go out. All these things that would be pain points have been ameliorated to some extent by President Trump's actions, and President Trump's efforts to punish Democrats by canceling these programs and laying people off have made it look more like a Trump shutdown, even if it otherwise might look more like a Democratic shutdown.
Mike Dorning on our Capitol Influence team. He's the deputy team leader with us here in Washington. Mike, we appreciate the setup, as always, with someone who has spent some time covering Capitol Hill. And we want to talk to a Democrat now for his sense of things. Sam Liccardo is a Democrat representing 16th District of California, the former mayor of San Jose, back with us on Bloomberg TV and radio. And Congressman, it's good to see you. Welcome back. I wonder your thoughts on what we're discussing here, because if the Democratic calculation is correct, you wait long enough, Republicans will eventually have to address the Obamacare subsidy issue with this year-end deadline approaching. How long do you think that is?
Well, we shouldn't need to wait that long. Speaker Mike Johnson said yesterday that there is no strategy moving forward. Well, there is a strategy. It's actually the oldest strategy on Capitol Hill. It's called negotiation. And I've been on the phone with a half dozen Republicans over the last day, and I can tell you that we can extend Affordable Care Act tax credits for those 22 million Americans and many more. We can do so at a lower cost with income caps, but what we can't do is force the burden of higher costs on tens of millions of American families, including those 22 million Americans who are going to see their premiums double. We can't do that. And so I think many Republicans understand that. The question is whether they're going to have the courage to step up. We can do this through negotiation, but we need a speaker willing to negotiate. And we are here, more than 200 Democrats waiting for a speaker to show up to negotiate with. He's not here yet. And, I was mayor of a city of 1 million people. We passed 8 balanced budgets, and every single one of them, I negotiated with people who disagree with me. That's leadership. That's what we all have to do.
What do you think about the moves, Congressman, that the administration has made that we were discussing, finding a workaround for military pay, federal law enforcement, helping to fund the WIC program? Did the administration effectively extend this shutdown by doing this, or take the glare off Democrats in the meantime? I'm trying to figure out the political strategy.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't think I'm paid well enough to be a very good political consultant to give you a good answer to that. But what I do know is that the focus now in the national debate is where it should be, which is health care. Because we know it's not just these 22 million Americans that are going to pay twice as much on their premiums, but all of us are going to pay much more for our premiums because another 4 million Americans will be pushed out of the insurance world into getting their care in emergency rooms and from ambulances, which is more expensive because we know that passes on the cost to all of us. So we're going to see all of our premiums rise if we don't get this solved. And we're out of time because we know November 1st is when all of us receive that information about what plans we can choose and at what price. So we've got to get it done quickly.
What is it that has you in Washington? I understand that your leader, Hakeem Jeffries, has called the Democratic Conference back into town just to be present. Are you having conversations with anyone? Are you doing interviews, trying to spread the message? What's the purpose of being here when the House is not actually in session?
Well, yes, we have had caucus meetings, and certainly we're talking to media as I am now. But frankly, my conversations with Republicans have been over the phone because they're not here, they're at home. Look, we're on duty, they're on vacation. We need everybody to be on duty because we need to do much more for the American people. They deserve better than this. And since the big ugly bill passed, 104 days ago, Speaker Johnson has called us into session exactly 19 days. So that is not a record of hard work that's going to be required to get us to negotiate to move forward. He's got to call the House back into session, and he needs to get his team here so we can negotiate.
Well, I know you have a unique view as a former mayor, and as we say frequently on this program, mayors don't always have the luxury of lawmakers in Washington when it comes to playing partisan politics. What is going to happen when these notices start going out? Many of them, to your point, are out already. Open enrollment set to begin on the 1st of November. Does your phone start ringing off the hook? Are you able to provide constituent services in the middle of a shutdown? And what would it mean? How many people would see their premiums rise in your district?
Well, we'll see 24,000, 24,000 families see their premiums nearly double as a result. And in my district, that means about $3,200 a year more that they'll be paying for their health insurance. But really, this is going to be a burden on the entire health system. We know it's going to force the closures of some clinics and hospitals, and it's going to increase the cost for all of us, even if we're on private plans that we don't purchase on the exchange. And so everyone's going to feel the pain here. Yes, we're going to get the calls, and yes, we will be there manning the phones and receiving the emails because our offices have been open. In fact, I even opened an additional office back at home in the last couple of weeks to ensure that we can handle what we know is a lot of pain for folks. We've been meeting with federal employees and their unions and so forth to try to figure out how we can reduce the burden that so many Americans are feeling.
I understand the Capitol Police have missed their first full paycheck now for the first time. They're not included in the military or the federal law enforcement coverage, unless you can tell me otherwise, Congressman. We've had a big conversation about security in the Capitol recently with the uptick in political violence. How concerned are you about the Capitol Police not being compensated? What does that mean for your security?
Well, forget my security. I think it's a shame, and we should all feel shame, because these are women and men who struggle to pay their rent, to live in a very expensive Washington metro. They deserve to get paid, just like everyone else does who's working hard. By the way, members of my team, I'm also not taking a paycheck during this time. We all need to get the government open, and we need to be able to treat all of our employees and the American people more fairly.
I want to ask you about the rhetoric that we've been hearing from the White House, and I'm not sure what the president will say. He's going to have a news conference later on today, and I suspect will add to this conversation. But in promising mass layoffs, as Russ Vought has at least begun to announce the rifts with this shutdown, the president has also suggested that on Friday he will have a list, 2 days from now, a list of what he refers to as Democrat programs that will be cut. Let's play for our audience what he said yesterday. Congressman, we'll have you respond. Here's the president.
The Democrats are getting killed, and we're going to have a list of them on Friday, closing up some of the most egregious socialist, semi-communist, probably not full communist, we're saving that for New York, but semi-communist programs, and we're closing them up. We're not closing up Republican programs because we think they work.
Congressman, I remain confused on this one because obviously citizens who are members of both parties and independents all tend to make use of these federal programs. Which programs are you aware that he's talking about?
I'm not sure I really know. Is he saying Social Security is semi-communist? I don't know, but nonetheless, I'm confident, as you are, that many Republican and Democratic Americans depend on all these programs, and we need to keep them up, open and running for America. But let's keep in mind, this threat is no different than the threat that we have heard since January 20th, right? We have seen 55,000 federal employees fired, 150,000 more pushed out the door. The most recent announcement was for another 4,000. We know it's all illegal. Obviously, that's in litigation. We've had many federal judges weigh in on this, and we've seen Republican-appointed judges telling this administration it's a violation of the APA and other laws. This continues to be illegal. We'll continue to fight it, but this is just more of the same.
Well, really interesting wrinkle here. Do you take him at his word? Will there be more firings? Will programs be closed down?
Oh, sure, he'll close them and then he'll reopen them when he realizes he made a mistake, just like he did a few days ago. Look, these folks are shooting from the hip and, more importantly, shooting before they aim. And we've seen that constantly, from the times of Doge through the rescissions and now these decisions. We know what the framers of the Constitution decided, which was the power of the purse lies with Congress. Obviously, everything that they're doing is illegal, and they're going to find that some of these things they're doing illegally are probably not very well considered even for them, as we have seen them routinely back up. So yes, we're going to see more of this, then they'll back off, then we'll have judges shut it down. We're going to continue to fight.
Well, we'll find out if you're right on that, Congressman, because it all does seem to be headed to the courts here. Sam Liccardo, many thanks. California's 16th District, the Democrat in Washington, with us live on Bloomberg TV and radio. We'll have more voices from both sides of the aisle as we make our way through this shutdown. And we'll assemble our panel next. It's Move Out Day at the Pentagon. For the press, this is Bloomberg. Interesting conversation with Congressman Liccardo as we make our way through day 15 of the government shutdown. Roughly 1 hour from now, senators will vote again on the continuing resolution that continues to fail. We'll let you know what happens, or maybe we should just make a promise to let you know if anything changes, because this has become quite the spin cycle most recently here. The cycle at the Pentagon today is out the door. This is a fascinating story, and if you listen to this program, you heard this one coming after the Secretary of War, as President Trump likes to call him, Pete Hegseth, laid down a marker for the Pentagon press corps right up to and until signing off on a piece of paper mandating new regulations in the way the press cover the Pentagon here. It's not going over well with anyone, well, maybe except OAN. But let me speak about our own shop here. Bloomberg News, along with most every other national news shop, including Fox News, Newsmax, the Washington Times, some of the conservative outlets, along with all the others, the three-letter networks, the Washington Post, New York Times, and so on, the 5 major TV networks say they will refuse to sign the new reporting limits set out by the defense secretary, and they've been given a couple of weeks to do so. We saw this coming in slow motion. A Bloomberg News statement reads, the Pentagon's new policy on press access restricts the sort of standard news gathering essential in any democracy. We will continue to uphold the values of an independent free press and rigorously report on the U.S. government, military, and matters of public interest. Following the Hegseth criteria endorsed by President Trump. So what's going on right now at the Pentagon is a bunch of journalists and their support crew dismantling computer systems, breaking down furniture, and getting out of the building. At some point, they'll have to turn in their credentials as well. Yeah. The process of covering the Pentagon is about to change dramatically, and I'll be very curious to see what happens to the leaks coming out of the Pentagon. With one news organization, this OAN, they're going to be the only ones in there, acting almost like a state TV network. And this is where we start our conversation with our political panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeanne, Zaino, and Rick Davis are with us. Rick is our Republican strategist partner at Stonecourt Capital, and Jeanne is our Democratic analyst, democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. What do you think about this, Jeanne? Not so much the protocol, but the response to see Fox News, the Washington Times, and other conservative outlets, with the exception of OAN, getting on the same page as CNN, MSNBC, and the others, yes, including Bloomberg, to push back on this Pentagon policy. Does that give you hope for the state of the national news media?
Yeah, I think it's very heartening that they have joined together to say that this is absolutely unacceptable. Let's not forget the Pentagon gets about $1 trillion of U.S. taxpayer money. It sends our young men and women into war. It's happening at a time we're shooting boats in Venezuela, killing people. The president, just hours after he says there's a chance we could have to go in and disarm Hamas. And Pete Hegseth flies off to Europe and says, oh, by the way, you can't enter the building until you agree to abide by these absolutely, insane, really is the way to put it, restrictions on press freedom. So I do think it is very, very heartening. I also think that Pete Hegseth doesn't understand a lot about reporting. Does anybody think reporters are just going to say, oh, okay, no more coverage of the Pentagon? I think we're going to see, Joe, and this is my guess, even better reporting. They're going to talk to their sources, and they're going to be harder on the Pentagon from the outside. So I think he's doing himself a disservice if he's trying to control the narrative.
I do tend to agree with you on what could be enhanced reporting. We're going to end up seeing stories now we would not have seen otherwise because of this challenge by the Pentagon, and we should be more specific. This was a 21-page document that journalists were asked to sign last month. As we report, one of the most concerning elements is a line barring journalists. This is the heart of the policy, barring journalists from reporting classified and even some unclassified information without the permission of the Pentagon. That's what would change here. You'd have to get essentially the secretary to sign off on your story before it goes out, and the secretary doesn't work for any newsroom. He did used to work, of course, for Fox News, which is, by the way, packing up its bags right now and getting out of the Correspondence Corridor, as it's called. This goes back to the years just after World War II. The then Defense Secretary in 1972, Secretary Melvin Laird renamed the Pentagon hallway Correspondence Corridor and dedicated a memorial to reporters killed while covering U.S. foreign wars. If you walk down the corridor, in fact, they have a memorial set up there invoking the likes of Walter Cronkite, Edward R. Murrow, Andy Rooney, and others. What do you think about this, Rick? You've spent more time in the Pentagon than most civilians due to your career here in Washington, and I know you're very familiar with some of the top brass, or you have been. You've prepared them for confirmation hearings. The press corps is a pretty important element of what happens in that building. What happens now?
Well, as you pointed out, it's going to be a new question on all the confirmation hearings that are coming up. So they better be prepared to defend the policy being made by the Secretary of War in front of Congress, because this is going to be an issue. And look, there's always been tension, in reporting at the Pentagon. There are a lot of reasons to keep certain plans and activities confidential. It's not an intelligence agency, so it doesn't have the protections that a lot of intelligence agencies have with the use of the press. And Jeannie's right. I mean, it's the largest single use of taxpayer dollars that the government has. And so how do you manage the push and the pull of the public disclosure of what goes on there with the need for some level of confidentiality on war plans, irrespective of who's tweeting them out on their Signal accounts. And so, long story short, it's an unenforceable policy. The reporters I've talked to, point out not only the point that you made, Joe, but also that there's a bar from even soliciting sensitive information and could get you thrown out of the Pentagon press corps. So, one, you don't know what's sensitive, and two, if you don't solicit, you don't get. You got to ask the questions, and so it's obviously an extreme situation, and I am not surprised that there's been a walkout because the Pentagon press corps has been heralded as one of the greatest institutions inside and outside of government. And as you point out, people have given their lives for this coverage. So if Pete Hegseth thinks he's going to make some progress here, he better look at revising this policy, because these journalists know what they have and they're not going to lose it.
Yeah, well, that was very well put. We remember what Pete Hegseth had to say to the media briefing following our strikes against Iran, Jeannie. That was a massive here's what you should be talking about kind of speech, as some reporters were questioning whether Iranian nuclear sites were totally obliterated, as the secretary and as the president had said. But what's going to happen in the Pentagon briefings now? I was talking to producer James about this earlier. Are you going to have one chair with OAN sitting in it? What's the point of even disseminating information?
That's absolutely right. I really hope that we are able to see the pictures of this and get the feed, because it will be very, very good to watch. The reality is Pete Hegseth has missed the mark that Donald Trump understands, and I'm surprised Donald Trump isn't pulling him in. You know the old adage, keep your friends close and your enemies closer? If he really thinks the press corps are his enemies, keep them close like Donald Trump does. He has no trouble answering questions all day long and directing what is happening in terms of the narrative coming out. That is the way Pete Hegseth needs to do it. Apparently, he is feeling like he doesn't have that skill, and so he's going to try to slam the door. And this is going to not work to his advantage. So strategically, politically, and of course, legally and constitutionally, this makes no sense. And the irony is he keeps saying this is because of national security. And yet the only leak, to Rick's point, we've seen this year, or the biggest leak, was from his own Signal chat, where he put a reporter on that Signal chat. So, all of this is befuddling. And I really wish Congress was working and the Senate could call him up soon to answer some questions about this nonsense.
Well, we should note as well, The Atlantic was part of this group here of news agencies packing up bags, refusing to sign this. Boy, maybe they regret saying anything about being added to the Signal chat. That would be like a real-time news feed coming out of the Pentagon at this point. Rick, does this actually have to be altered, or would the next secretary be the one to do this? If Pete Hegseth finds himself surrounded by leakers, and we've got stories on the front page every day and on the terminal about something that he doesn't want us to be talking about, does he let them move back in?
Yeah, they're going to have to arrange something to accommodate everybody. He's made his mark. He's like, I've told the press that they can't wander around the halls asking people questions, which is what they've been doing since there was a Pentagon. And so now he's got to sit down with a group and say, okay, what is it that I can do to meet my needs, for confidentiality, which is an issue inside the Pentagon, and make it, accessible to you and your First Amendment protections. And there's a deal there to be done. It is the deal administration. Go cut a deal.
That's right.
And
well, here we go.
I think Donald Trump would appreciate that.
You know, just yesterday he talked about moving the press corps out of the White House. Just behold that for a minute, because we've heard that story before, too. Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino, Bloomberg Politics contributors. Great insights. Thank you for the panel. Maybe this will change. Christopher Smart is on the way in next as we turn to the economy on Bloomberg. Headline this morning was stocks rise as Besant fuels U.S.-China trade hopes. Now we're hearing about trade uncertainty, all in the same trading session. I don't know what investors were listening to here, but it reminds us of how much has yet to be accomplished on the trade front, specifically when it comes to China. We're going to be digging into that with Christopher Smart in a moment. He's with us here in Washington from Arbroath Group. First, Kristine Aquino joins us, managing editor for Bloomberg Markets Live blog, who has a little case of whiplash today, watching things bounce around. Kristine, we just wanted to get under the hood with you for a moment here to kind of extend what we just heard from Charlie Pellet. It's great to see you, by the way. This market is one that's been described as frothy, as toppy, and so anytime somebody says the wrong thing in Washington, all of a sudden we see red arrows. But it has not been the beginning of a trend. Is this still a market that is owned by retail bros who can't help but buy the dip?
Good question, Joe. And my neck hurts watching these markets because that's exactly it. As you described, it does seem like it is a market caught between still wanting to buy that dip and still believing that this rally can keep going, but also very afraid of when the music will stop playing. And this is why we keep getting this back and forth between a rally and then suddenly a bit of a sell-off back to a rally again. And also the catalysts keep shifting, right? When it comes to how it all relates to trade, I mean, it is very much the fuel for a very volatile trading period because the situation in trade itself is very volatile. We don't really have a lot of clarity. All we've gotten this week is kind of headline trading between China and the U.S. in terms of what they're hoping to get out of this relationship, what are kind of their red lines and all of that. And it does feel like that's something that could continue until we get that sort of more clarity in terms of the relationship, how that's going to shake out, which probably we're not going to get until November, right?
How many times have you heard the word bubble today? Because part of your job is reading through analyst notes, and this is the question, right? This is the one politics show on Bloomberg. Every other show is asking whether we have an AI bubble. You saw Jared Bernstein, one of the former president's chief economic advisors, this is the Biden campaign, calling the bubble in AI in an op-ed earlier this week. But every time we hear from an executive, whether it's Jensen Huang, Lisa Su, they tell us we're in the early stages of what could be a 10-year spending cycle. How should the market be looking at this?
Yeah, I mean, very interesting. The word bubble has really permeated the sentiment in markets and also here in the Bloomberg newsroom for the past week, I want to say, at the very least. And, you know, what we're hearing from executives is, of course, very expected because they want to be talking their book. They want investors to be buying into this AI theme and convincing them that this is going on for much longer than anyone expects. And that may be true, but it's also true that in a longer term cycle, there will be pullbacks. And it's possible that, you know, when we get instances like this, where valuations are near the top and there's a lot of kind of hope already priced into markets, that we do get pullbacks when the news is not always as positive as markets expect. And increasingly, markets expect news to be more positive than their already very positive expectations. So it's a very high bar in terms of companies kind of getting over those expectations.
Yeah. Well put, as always. Kristine Aquino with us live from New York. Kristine, thank you so much for your insights. Yeah, when it comes to the AI trade today, AMD is still cranking after that massive rally the other day, up $16, 8%. Micron still pushing higher. It's up 2%. Up about $4, though NVIDIA is sagging today, down just about $1, about 0.5%. And we'll have more on the markets coming up at the top of the hour. So, yeah, uncertainty. Maybe bubble is our first word of the day. Uncertainty is the other, at least in the second half of the session. Despite what Scott Bessent said earlier today, we might even extend our trade truce with China. Here's a bit of his news conference from this morning.
Not only is China fueling Russia's war, but China's actions have once again demonstrated the risk of being dependent on them on rare earths, and for that matter, anything. If China wants to be an unreliable partner to the world, then the world will have to decouple.
Decouple? That was the word of the year in the last administration. But along with that tough talk, as I mentioned, the Treasury Secretary proposing a longer pause on higher tariffs on Chinese goods in return for Beijing putting off its plan to tighten limits on rare earths. We're only a couple of weeks away from the big meeting between Trump and Xi, and so the drumbeat's getting louder on both sides here, which is why it's great to be joined by Christopher Smart, and he's with us in person today as well. The toast of Boston with us here in the nation's capital, founder and managing partner, Arbroath Group, former special assistant to the President, National Economic Council during the Obama administration. It's great to see you, Christopher.
Great to be with you. Great to be with you.
So this conversation's apparently never going to end, because I think we may have been talking about this last time you were on. What do you make of the bluster? And I'm assuming that's all it is on both sides here, whether it's an additional 100% tariff or cracking down on rare earth magnets if you're President Xi. Is this all posturing for a meeting, or are we in bigger trouble than we think?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think just to take a step back, you've got the two largest economies in the world, deeply integrated with one another, deeply uncomfortable with the fact that they are so integrated with one another. And whether you call it decoupling or de-risking or slowly trying to pull that apart is very hard to do without creating a lot of waves and a lot of blowback elsewhere. I think what's really interesting right now is for all of the issues we have on the table with China, whether they're military, diplomatic, human rights, the president is focused very narrowly on an economic deal, and then within the economic space, very narrowly on a tariff export control kind of deal.
Yes.
So it's almost going to be a tariff for rare earths or our technology exports for their rare earth exports. And all of the rest of it is going to be left unanswered for now.
Which has been the case with a lot of these framework deals, that they are quite narrow and might need further negotiating. Is the market kidding itself, though, to think that this meeting is going to change something? I mean, we're right near all-time highs, as we've just established, Christopher, and I don't want to turn you into an investment strategist here, but sometimes it's hard to justify what we're seeing when we know how scared Wall Street is of this not working out.
Well, I think they are scared. It's very hard, I think, for investors to price in tail risks.
Yes,
right.
Sure.
So they're focused more on the good earnings that the banks delivered yesterday, the GDP numbers that we may or may not get anytime soon, the AI story, the deregulation story, the big beautiful bill, and the impetus that's going to give a lot of capex next year. So that is what I think is driving markets right now, and that's sort of the base case that everybody has. But everybody's looking over their shoulder. On the one side, there's the China risk. On the other side, there is the tariff blowback risk. And then there's just a whole lot of supply chains that have yet to work through all of these tariffs. And that's, I think, high on everybody's mind as well.
Stephen Myron, speaking earlier today, self-labeled as out of consensus, says the very uncertainty that the president is creating here with regard to tariffs is the reason why the Fed should cut interest rates. And that's been, well, that's going against the grain of what Jay Powell's been saying this whole time. He's been holding off on cuts because of the uncertainty, not knowing what the impact would be. Does Stephen Myron end up being right here?
Well, it's not anything I learned in my economics classes or in my investment career. I think
out of consensus.
It's out of consensus, and I think Stephen Myron is staking the ground on the out of consensus trade in his earlier speeches about what R-star should be, what's a natural interest rate for the economy, and I think. He's got a view. We'll see how he's able to convince any of his Fed colleagues whether that view makes sense or not, but I'm not sure the market is buying it.
Well, no, I think that's clear, and I wonder as well about what comes next with regard to the government shutdown. We're talking about mass layoffs. I just saw a headline roll that it wasn't just 4,000, that Russ Vought saying just now on the radio that will probably be higher than 10,000. You add that to all of the early retirements and some of the buyouts, if I can even call them that amounted to about 250,000 federal workers. Add another layer with mass deportations. And we've got a job market that looks a lot different than it did even a couple of months ago, Christopher. That would prompt interest rate cuts, presumably. How are you looking at the market?
I think that's right. I think, everybody who is so excited about AI and the CapEx story is also looking very closely at the weakness in the labor market. And that continues to unfold right now. And these moves with the government shutdown, what is remarkable is that it's the largest government and the largest economy in the world, and it's not really a top news story anymore, which I think means that neither side is interested in getting this settled anytime soon. And I think if you're an investor, you have to not just sort of assume at one point or another Chuck Schumer will call President Trump or the other way around, and we'll get a handshake and a deal.
Yes, right.
This could go on through the end of the year,
Sure
and I'm
could.
not sure markets are thinking about that at all.
And I'm hearing that a lot more often now. Even the Speaker of the House said this could be a record setter, and clearly President Trump is not looking to budge anytime soon, which is all the more reason why there's confusion about Argentina. I want to ask you about this while you're here, and we'll start with what the president had to say in terms of America first and his agenda economically. Let's listen to President Trump.
We're going to work very much with the president. We think he's going to win. He should win. And if he does win, we're going to be very helpful. And if he doesn't win, we're not going to waste our time, because you have somebody whose philosophy has no chance of making Argentina great again.
Okay, and he's sitting across from Javier Milei when he's saying this. I'm a little confused, because apparently this money does not arrive if Milei doesn't win the election, for starters. But $20 billion was the number yesterday. This is now, I think, up to 40. What was it, James? 40 or $60 billion, the headline?
I think 40.
That we just ran. $40 billion. So twice what the president said, saying openly that this really does not help America, that we're investing in good politics and a good friend in Argentina. What are you calling this?
I don't know what the word for it is, frankly, but it's sort of interesting to see the president say, we're going to bet on this guy if he wins, but if he doesn't, we're going to pull our money out.
Right.
Which may be too late.
So a conditional bailout is.
There are lots of questions about Argentina and this particular set of bailouts, because, first of all, Argentina is not a military ally. Argentina is certainly not systemic to the global financial system. We seem to be backing a horse in an ideological race for economic policy within Latin America. And it is, frankly, the first time that U.S. taxpayer dollars have been exposed to the Argentine peso directly.
Wow. Yeah.
The $20 billion seems to be a currency swap with the Argentine Central Bank. And then what was announced today, apparently from Secretary Bessent, was another $20 billion of private banks and other investors willing to put money to work. I'd love to see what that list is.
Indeed.
And who is ready to sort of take that leap of faith about Argentine midterm election outcomes.
Yeah.
So this is a head scratcher.
Well, okay. This administration has been, in many ways, original. Is this a first?
Well, it is. I mean, the last time we did anything close to this was with Mexico in the bailout with President Clinton, and those were actually backed. Our loans to Mexico were backed by Mexican oil reserves. Yeah. So there was a lot more going on there. Wow. Already, as you may know, as you do know, Argentina is $40 billion in the hole to the IMF. So, it's got a big hole to fill if it's able to turn things right.
Some of the backroom conversations at the IMF this week in Washington are focused on this quite deeply. There are a lot of head scratching, to your point.
And as you pointed out earlier, it's very off-brand for a president who's putting America first.
Yes, right.
It's something that we've always thought that IMF involvement to help emerging markets with good policies grow better is always in the United States' interest. This sort of backdoor approach, end run around the IMF, is new and different, and, as I say, off-brand.
Truly interesting times that we're living in here, and we'll let you know what happens to this and what the final number is, who might be behind that second tranche of $20 billion. You think FIFA is going to stay in Foxborough? That was the big story yesterday.
That is. We've got our fingers crossed in Boston.
Yeah. The president should know that Boston Stadium is not in Boston. FIFA calls it that, but Foxborough's like an hour away. Christopher Smart, Arbroath, great to see you.
Great to be with you.
Back as always.
Thank
This is Bloomberg.